Sign it, or I swear I'll have my lawyer make this very ugly for you." Ryan Mitchell's voice was ice. He slid the divorce papers across the white tablecloth so hard they nearly flew off the edge. His jaw was tight, his eyes were cold, the expensive restaurant around them went completely still. Emma Parker looked at those papers, looked at the man she had loved for 11 years, the man she had quietly saved, again and again from complete destruction, and she picked up her pen. She signed without a single tremor. Then she looked directly into his eyes and said, "Softly, I hope you find everything you think you need." Ryan grabbed the papers and walked away laughing. He had absolutely no idea what he had just thrown away. Before we go any further, if this kind of story speaks to you, please subscribe to our channel right now and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning, because what happened next will change everything you think you know about this man. The reservation was for 7 o'clock. Ryan had made it himself. 3 days earlier, using the name of the restaurant Emma always talked about wanting to try. Bellini's, an Italian place on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago, with a view of the lake that turned gold at sunset and crystal black by nightfall. Emma had mentioned it once, maybe twice, in the easy way people mention things they admire but never expect to receive. Ryan remembered that. He used it anyway, not because he wanted to give her something beautiful on her way out the door, but because he knew Emma would not make a scene in a place like Bellini's. She would not raise her voice in a restaurant with white linen napkins and a sommelier who floated between tables like a ghost in a tuxedo. She would behave, she would be graceful, she would make this easy for him. That was the calculation he made, and he was right about the restaurant. He was wrong about everything else. Ryan arrived 12 minutes early. He ordered a glass of Barolo, studied the menu without seeing it, and rehearsed the things he was going to say. He had rehearsed them for 3 weeks, actually, since the moment he decided that Emma Parker no longer fit the life he was building. He told himself it was about growth. People grow apart. That's what he said to Marcus Webb, his business partner, over bourbon at the Capitol Club 2 Fridays ago. People grow apart. Marcus, it happens. You can't hold yourself back just because someone else isn't moving at the same speed. Marcus had nodded slowly and said, "Whatever you need to tell yourself." Ryan hadn't liked that. He told himself Marcus didn't understand. Emma arrived at 7:02. She wore a deep burgundy dress, the one she bought for his company's anniversary gala 2 years ago. Simple cut, good fabric, nothing flashy. Her dark hair was down around her shoulders. She was a plus-size woman, 29 years old, with a round face and dark eyes that always managed to look like they were paying very close attention to whatever was in front of them. That was something Ryan used to love about her. The way Emma looked at you like you were the only thing in the room worth looking at. He noticed she wasn't wearing the necklace he'd given her for their 7th anniversary, the one with the sapphire pendant. He noticed, and he felt something small and unidentifiable move through his chest. He let it go. "You look nice," he said, standing as she approached. It was the truth. He always told her the truth about that. Whatever else he had failed to be honest about, he had always told her she was beautiful. He believed it. He just had somehow convinced himself that beauty was not enough, that she was not enough, that the softness of her, the way she moved through the world without urgency, without performance, without the relentless social calculation of the women he met at charity galas and investor dinners, was a kind of limitation rather than a choice. "Thank you," Emma said. She sat down, placed her purse on the chair beside her, and looked at him with those steady dark eyes. "You said it was important, it is. Then let's talk about it." She didn't pick up the menu. She didn't look around the restaurant or comment on the view. She just waited, hands folded in her lap, watching him the way she always watched him. Patient, present, like she had already decided to let him lead wherever this was going. Ryan reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and placed the envelope on the table between them. Emma looked at it. She looked back at him. She didn't touch it. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Emma," he cleared his throat, "you know we've been struggling. We've been struggling for a long time. And I think I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I think that we've reached a place where Ryan," she said his name quietly, not unkindly, but firmly enough to stop him. What has held her gaze? Divorce papers. The sommelier appeared at that moment, arrived like a ghost at precisely the second, and waved him away with the back of his hand. The man retreated without a sound. Emma did not move for what felt like a very long time. She sat perfectly still, hands in her lap, eyes on his face, and Ryan found himself gripping the stem of his wine glass harder than he needed to. "Open it," he said. "I had the lawyer draw everything up." "It's fair, more than fair. I heard you," she said. She reached out and picked up the envelope, opened it with the same deliberate calm she brought to everything. Unfolded the papers, and Ryan watched her face as she read, looking for the crack the moment the composure would slip and the real Emma would surface. The one who still needed him, the one who would remind him that he was being cruel. Emma's face did not crack. She read each page, turned each one carefully. And when she reached the last page, the signature line with her name printed beneath it, she reached into her purse and took out a pen. Her own pen, not the one Ryan had placed on the table. She signed every page, clear and unhurried, "Emma Parker. Emma Parker. Emma Parker." When she was done, she folded the papers back into the envelope and placed it on his side of the table. Then she looked at him, and Ryan saw something in her eyes that he had never seen there before. Something he couldn't name in the moment but would spend the next several months trying to understand. It wasn't anger, it wasn't grief, it wasn't even disappointment. It was clarity. "I hope you find everything you think you need," she said. And Emma Parker stood up from that table, picked up her purse, and walked out of Bellini's without looking back. Ryan sat alone at the table for a long time. The Barolo sat untouched. The sommelier came back eventually, cautiously, and Ryan ordered another glass. He didn't drink either. He sat there in the expensive silence of that 42nd floor restaurant and waited for the feeling of liberation he had promised himself. It came. Eventually, he told himself it came. The thing about Ryan Mitchell that most people got wrong was this. He had not always been cruel. There was a version of this man, not so far back in the timeline, who was someone worth knowing. He grew up on the south side of Chicago, the second of 3 boys raised by a school librarian mother named Carol and a father, Thomas, who managed a hardware store for 22 years before his knees gave out and he had to stop. They were not poor, but they were careful. Carol Mitchell clipped coupons. Thomas Mitchell drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it. Ryan shared a bedroom with his brother Derek until he was 17. He was not a spectacular student, but he was a relentless one. The kind of person who stayed up 2 hours, after everyone else, because he had decided he was going to be something, though he couldn't always specify what. He got into the University of Illinois on a partial scholarship and a student loan that took him 9 years to pay off. He studied business. He graduated with a 3.4 and no connections and moved back to Chicago because that was where his grandmother still lived in her apartment on the north side, and she said he could stay in her spare room for as long as he needed. He met Emma Parker at a coffee shop in Wicker Park on a Thursday morning in October. He was 26 and broke, and 2 months into the worst period of his adult life, the startup he had launched with his friend Daniel had just lost its only client, and Ryan had not slept more than 4 hours in 3 nights because he kept staring at spreadsheets, trying to find a way to make numbers work that simply would not. He was sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and his laptop open to a document he couldn't bear to read anymore, and Emma was 2 seats down with a book and a cup of tea, and she laughed at something in whatever she was reading, a real laugh, unguarded, surprised out of her, and Ryan looked up and felt something inside him loosen slightly. He introduced himself. He was terrible at it. He said something about liking her book cover before realizing he hadn't even seen the title, which she found funny rather than stupid, which already told him something important about her. Her name was Emma Parker. She was 24. She worked in arts administration at a nonprofit, and she had a degree in art history from Northwestern, which Ryan would later learn was one of the more expensive universities in the country. A detail Emma offered without particular emphasis, as if it were simply a fact about her past rather than an achievement worth displaying. They talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Ryan knew because he had a meeting he was already 20 minutes late for, and he kept choosing not to leave. He asked her to dinner. She said yes. 3 months later, she told him she was falling in love with him. And Ryan, who had not said those words to anyone since a disastrous relationship at 19, said them back with a kind of terrified relief, like a man who'd been holding his breath underwater and finally broke the surface. She met his mother. Carol Mitchell liked Emma immediately and told Ryan so in that direct way she had. "Don't mess this up," she said. Ryan laughed and said he wouldn't. He would, of course, but not for a long time, not until the money came. The startup recovered. It did better than recovered. Ryan and Daniel rebuilt it from the ground up, made 2 pivots that turned out to be exactly right. And by the time Ryan was 28, Mitchell Technologies had its first serious investor meeting. By 29, they were profitable. By 31, they were growing fast enough that Ryan stopped sleeping again. But this time, for different reasons, he married Emma when he was 30. She wore a dress that cost less than most of the guests' shoes and looked more beautiful in it than anyone in the room. His grandmother cried, his mother cried, Ryan cried a little, which surprised him. The early years of the marriage were good. Not perfect. Ryan worked too much and Emma worried about him too much, and they had the arguments that couples have when one person is building something and the other is watching them disappear into it. But there was warmth. There was laughter. There was Emma sitting up with him at 2 in the morning when a deal fell through, making tea and listening without trying to fix anything, just letting him talk until the panic quieted. There was all of that. And then the money grew past a certain point, and Ryan Mitchell started becoming a different person, and neither of them understood what was happening until it was already done. It started small, the way these things always do. He hired a new head of marketing, a woman named Priya who knew everyone in Chicago's business community, and started inviting Ryan to events Emma had never been part of. Charity galas, industry dinners, private parties in penthouses that overlooked the lake. Ryan went to these things because they were professionally important, which was true. And he met people at these events who looked at him and saw only the version of him that had arrived, the successful founder, the man in the right suit at the right party, and that was intoxicating in a way he hadn't expected. And he started seeing Emma differently at those events. Not because she changed, but because he had started looking at her through the eyes of people he barely knew, measuring her against a standard he'd never thought to apply before. She was not glamorous. She did not perform. She stood at those parties in her simple dresses and talked to whoever was next to her with genuine interest. And people liked her. Strangers always liked Emma, but she didn't work the room the way Priya did, the way the other wives and partners of these businessmen did, with a kind of calculated ease that Ryan had started to mistake for sophistication. He began making small, cutting remarks, so small, so casual, that he could always deny to himself, if not to her, that they were meant to hurt. You could try something more fitted for these things. The women at this level, they have a certain, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying, maybe a nutritionist, just to get some energy, not anything dramatic. Emma heard every word. She always heard every word. She had the kind of listening that missed nothing. She did not fight back, not in the ways he expected. She didn't cry or throw things or issue ultimatums. She went quiet in the particular way that Emma went quiet, not with absence, but with this kind of stillness, like deep water, like something that had decided to wait. Ryan misread her silence as acceptance, as agreement. He started spending more time with clients who were also becoming something like friends. Marcus, Priya, a real estate developer named Bradford Chase who had a laugh like a cannon and a penthouse in Gold Coast and seemed to know everyone in the city worth knowing. They went to games together. They went to golf courses that Ryan had dreamed about as a kid. And slowly, gradually, the life Ryan was living began to feel like a suit that didn't have room for Emma Parker in it. He told himself this was about their incompatibility, about different directions, about growth. He did not tell himself, I was ashamed of the person who saved me. He did not know, yet, that he should. The Monday after Bellini's, Ryan Mitchell woke up in his apartment. He had moved to a new place 6 months before the divorce dinner, citing the need for space during a stressful business period, which was one of the many small deceptions he had arranged for himself and felt genuinely, startlingly good. He made his own coffee. He stood at the window in his bathrobe looking at the cities below and felt the particular lightness of someone who has put down something heavy and can finally straighten up. He called Marcus. She signed? Last night. A pause. How'd she take it? Ryan thought of Emma's face. The clarity in her eyes. She was fine, better than I expected. Honestly. Marcus said. What? Nothing. I hope you know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Ryan said. He believed it. He made a reservation at a steakhouse for dinner with Bradford Chase that same night and ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than his first week's salary at his first job, and Bradford toasted him and said, "To new beginnings," and Ryan said, "To new beginnings," and they clinked glasses and laughed at something that wasn't that funny. And Ryan told himself this was the right life. This was the life he'd worked for. He went on 3 dates in the first 2 months. Women he met through Bradford's social circle, polished, ambitious, interesting in the ways he had decided he needed someone to be interesting. The dates were fine. They were more than fine. They were exciting in the way that new things are exciting when you're paying attention to the surface of them. He did not think about Emma, or when he did, he framed it as guilt about the divorce rather than loss of her specifically. He was very careful about this distinction. Mitchell Technologies was doing well. The quarterly numbers were strong. A new partnership with a data firm in Austin had come together faster than projected. Ryan had just hired 2 senior engineers away from a competitor and felt the particular pleasure of a chess player who can see 5 moves ahead. He was winning. He was so busy winning that he almost missed the first sign. It came in week 7, a Tuesday morning in late autumn. His CFO, a careful man named Jonathan Hale, asked to see him alone before the 9 o'clock leadership meeting. Ryan assumed it was about the Austin partnership. There had been some paperwork delays, and he waved Jonathan into his office with the easy confidence of a man who expected good news. Jonathan closed the door and sat down and placed a single sheet of paper on Ryan's desk. He had the expression of someone who had practiced how to say something and still wasn't sure the practice was enough. "I need you to look at something," Jonathan said. Ryan looked at the paper. It was a summary document, a capital flow analysis, and at first it looked like what those things always looked like: columns of numbers, percentage changes, institutional references. He started reading with half his attention, and then he stopped and read again. "What is this?" Ryan asked. "It's a pattern," Jonathan said carefully. "We've been doing an internal audit not because anything seemed wrong, but as part of the year-end process, and May on my team found some irregularities in the history of certain funding decisions." "What kind of irregularities?" Jonathan paused. "In 2019, when the Hargreaves deal almost collapsed." "Do you remember?" Ryan remembered. The Hargreaves deal. A critical distribution partnership that had been one bad phone call away from falling apart, and then mysteriously, almost impossibly, had stabilized when a quiet injection of bridge capital came through a fund Ryan had never managed to fully identify. At the time, he'd attributed it to good luck, to the reputation of the company, to forces he didn't fully understand but was grateful for. "I remember," Ryan said, "and in 2020, the Series B, when Consolidated Capital pulled out 24 hours before the round closed and we almost couldn't make payroll." Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. He remembered that too. One of the worst 48 hours of his professional life. And then somehow, impossibly, a replacement investor had materialized through a channel that his deal team had struggled to trace. They traced it eventually to a holding company registered in Delaware, which was where the trail went cold. "Jonathan," Ryan said, "what are you telling me?" Jonathan placed another sheet on the desk, then another. "We kept pulling. May is very thorough." "Ryan," she kept pulling on the thread. He looked at his employer steadily. 11 separate incidents over 6 years, capital infusions, investor introductions, a very specific intervention with First Midwest Bank in 2021. When they were considering calling your line of credit, each one traced, eventually through multiple layers, to a single private investment vehicle. The room felt different than it had 60 seconds ago. Ryan didn't know how that was possible, but it was. "And," he said, his voice was very level, "the vehicle is controlled by a family trust," Jonathan said. He picked up the last document on his small stack and held it. He looked at it for a moment before passing it across the desk. Ryan took it. "Read the name at the top, the Parker Family Trust." The room was completely silent. Ryan could hear his own breathing. "Parker," he said. "Parker Emma Parker Whitfield," Jonathan said quietly. "Before she changed her name, her family name," he paused. "Her mother is Claire Whitfield Parker. Her father is George Parker. The Parker Group, the real estate and private equity conglomerate headquartered in New York." Another pause. "They are worth approximately $4.3 billion. Ryan put the document down on his desk. He picked it up again. He put it down. He started. "No," Jonathan said. "She never in 11 years. Ryan stood up from his desk. He walked to the window of his office, the window that looked out over downtown Chicago, over the city he had built his empire in, the city where he had sat across a white tablecloth from his wife and slid divorce papers toward her with a smile on his face, and he stood there for a long time without saying anything at all. "Are you all right?" Jonathan asked. "Close the door on your way out," Ryan said. Jonathan left without another word. Ryan stood at that window for 47 minutes. He knew the time because he had a clock on the wall behind him, and he watched the minutes move the way. A man watches a door close on something he's realized too late he needed 11 times. 6 years she had, invisibly, without a word or a gesture toward credit or acknowledgement, reached into her family's resources and saved the company he believed he had built with his own brilliance and drive and determination. She had watched him walk into investor meetings with his chin up and his shoulders back, certain of himself, unaware that the ground beneath his feet had been quietly repaired by the woman he left at home. She had watched him give speeches about self-made success. She had watched him receive awards. She had sat across from him at dinner parties, while he talked about Mitchell Technologies like it was a monument to his own capability, and she had smiled and said nothing. and she had gone home and signed documents the next morning that kept his monument from crumbling. And then he had taken her to Bellini's and handed her the end of their marriage and expected her to beg for it back. Ryan Mitchell pressed his hand against the cold glass of his office window and closed his eyes. He had not lost an inconvenient wife. He had lost the only person who had ever believed in him enough to protect his dream without asking for anything in return. And somewhere in the city below him, Emma Parker was living a life he had told himself she wasn't good enough for. He was beginning to understand who in this story had never been good enough. He picked up his phone. Called Marcus. When Marcus answered, Ryan said one thing: "I need to find her." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said, "I figured it would come to that." "Did you know?" "About her family." A pause. "I knew something," Marcus said carefully. "Not everything, but enough to know that you didn't know enough." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't my story to tell, man, and because you weren't in any kind of place to hear it." Another pause. "Are you in a place to hear it now?" Ryan looked at his reflection in the glass, at the man looking back at him, the successful man, the self-made man, the man who had smiled when he pushed those papers across the table. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I have to try." Outside the window, Chicago was loud and bright and indifferent, moving at its usual speed through another day, carrying its citizens forward whether they were ready or not. Ryan Mitchell was not ready. He was not even close to ready. But he had finally stopped pretending he'd already arrived. Ryan Mitchell spent the first week after the divorce doing exactly what a man does when he's convinced himself he made the right decision. He kept moving. He kept busy. He filled every hour with something loud enough to drown out anything quiet trying to surface underneath. Monday, he flew to Austin for a meeting with the data firm partnership. Tuesday, he had lunch with Bradford Chase and two venture who wanted to talk about a real estate tech play that had nothing to do with Mitchell Technologies, but felt exciting in the way. New things always felt exciting. Wednesday, he had his assistant reschedule 3 calls he didn't want to take, and instead spent 2 hours at a gym he'd joined the day after the divorce, working out with the kind of intensity that had nothing to do with fitness and everything to do with not thinking. He did not think about Emma, or when he did, he closed the door on it quickly. A practiced move, he'd gotten good at it. By Friday of that first week, he had already told the story of the divorce to 4 different people in 4 different ways, and each version was slightly cleaner, slightly more reasonable, slightly more inevitable sounding than the last. The marriage had run its course. They wanted different things. It was mutual. These things happen. People nodded. People said they were sorry, and then they moved on because that's what people do. And Ryan was grateful for that. He did not want anyone sitting with the story too long. Marcus Webb was the exception. Marcus had known Ryan since the early days of Mitchell Technologies, had come on as a strategic advisor in year 2, and eventually become the closest thing Ryan had to a best friend, which was a category Ryan had always managed with a certain amount of emotional efficiency. Marcus was 51, had been divorced once himself, and had the particular quality of a man who says very little but means all of it. He called Ryan on that Friday afternoon, not texted. Called. "How are you actually doing?" Marcus asked. "I'm good," Ryan said. "Better than good. I feel like I can breathe again." "Right, I mean it." "I know you mean it," Marcus said. "That's what concerns me." Ryan laughed. "I'm not going to fall apart over this. Marcus, I made a decision and I'm standing by it. I didn't say anything about falling apart." "Then what?" A pause. The kind Marcus used when he was deciding how much of the truth to give you. "You ever hear from her since?" "No, and I don't expect to. Emma's not the type to. She doesn't chase things." "Marcus never has. She just accepts and moves forward. It's actually one of the things He stopped himself. "She'll be fine. I'm sure she will," Marcus said. And there was something in his voice that Ryan couldn't quite read. Something between certainty and irony, like he knew the shape of a punchline Ryan hadn't heard yet. "What does that mean?" Ryan asked. "Nothing," Marcus said. "I hope you get everything you're looking for, man." "I genuinely do." They hung up. Ryan stood in his apartment kitchen for a moment with the phone in his hand, replaying the last 30 seconds of that conversation, and then he put the phone face down on the counter and opened the refrigerator and stared into it for no particular reason. Emma would be fine. He was certain of it. He just couldn't explain quite why the certainty required so much repetition. 3 weeks passed. Then 6. Ryan moved through November with the energy of a man who has decided to perform wellness until it becomes real. The dates he went on were pleasant. The business was growing. Bradford Chase threw a party in December that Ryan attended and stood at the center of and smiled through every conversation, and people looked at him and saw exactly what he wanted them to see: a successful, confident, self-determined man at the top of his game. He got home at midnight and sat in his apartment in the silence that is particularly loud after a very noisy evening, and he thought, for the first time in weeks, about Emma Parker. Not with guilt, not exactly, more with a strange, unplaced curiosity about where she was, what she was doing. Whether she had cried yet, somewhere he couldn't see, he picked up his phone, looked at her contact, put the phone down without dialing. He told himself he was being responsible, clean breaks. Moving forward, he went to sleep. He did not know that while he slept, the first crack in the foundation of Mitchell Technologies had already appeared. He did not know yet that in 3 days, a phone call from a number he didn't recognize would begin pulling a thread that would unravel everything. He did not know, but it was already happening. The call came on a Tuesday morning in December, 11 days before Christmas. Ryan was in his office reviewing a contract when his phone lit up with a number he didn't have saved. He almost let it go to voicemail, something's instinct, or something close to it made him answer. "Mitchell," he said. "Mr. Mitchell," a man's voice, formal, cautious. "My name is Gerald Sims. I'm a senior relationship manager at First Midwest Bank. I apologize for reaching you directly. I would normally go through your CFO, but the matter is somewhat time-sensitive." Ryan sat up straighter. "What matter?" Pause that lasted exactly 1 second, too long. "We've been conducting a review of commercial credit relationship standard process. End of year, and there are some questions that have come up regarding your account that I'd like to discuss in person." "Questions," Ryan repeated. "Nothing alarming," Gerald Sims said quickly, too quickly. "Simply a review." "Would you be available Thursday?" Ryan said he would. He hung up the phone and sat very still for a moment. First Midwest Bank had been Mitchell Technologies' primary financial institution for 5 years. The relationship had always been strong, or he had always believed it was strong. He had never received a call like this one, direct, cautious, smelling faintly of concern beneath the professional polish. He called Jonathan Hale immediately. "Did you know about this?" Ryan asked. Jonathan paused. "I received a preliminary communication last week. I was going to discuss it with you at Friday's review." "Discuss it with me now." Another pause. "They're asking questions about the structure of our capital history. Going back several years, it's Ryan, it's probably nothing. Year-end reviews can trigger these things. But there's a possibility that the questions are connected to something larger." "What's something larger?" "Some of our institutional partners have been quiet. Quieter than usual. 2 calls I was expecting haven't come. And Harrington Group, they were supposed to confirm the renewal of their advisory position last week. They haven't." Ryan's chest tightened. Harrington Group was not a large piece of Mitchell Technologies' ecosystem, but they were a respected one. The kind of name that other investors looked at as a signal. If Harrington was going quiet, people would notice. People were probably already noticing. "Find out what's happening," Ryan said. "All of it. I want a full picture by Thursday morning." He put the phone down, looked out his office window at the city below. The city that had felt, 3 weeks ago, like something he owned. He thought about what Marcus had said. "I hope you get everything you're looking for." He pushed the thought away. This was unrelated. This was business. Business had turbulence. He had navigated turbulence before. He was good at this. Thursday's meeting at First Midwest Bank did not go the way Ryan expected. Gerald Sims was a lean, careful man in his late 50s, who had the manner of someone who delivers unwelcome information professionally, but not without some residual human discomfort about it. He had 2 colleagues in the room, a woman introduced as a risk analyst, and a younger man who took notes and said nothing. They sat across a conference table from Ryan and Jonathan Hale, and Gerald Sims opened a folder and placed it on the table between them. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, "I want to be straightforward with you. We value the Mitchell Technologies relationship enormously. That hasn't changed. What I need to discuss with you is a question of institutional confidence, specifically some concerns that have been raised by certain parties in your investor network about the underlying structure of several capital events in your company's history." "What concerns?" Ryan said. His voice was level. He was good at level. Specifically, Gerald glanced at the folder. "There appear to be questions about the source and nature of bridge financing that stabilized several critical moments for your company. The Series B period in particular, and the Hargreaves transaction in 2019. Some of your current partners have been asking questions that we, as your banking institution, are now obligated to explore." "Those were legitimate transactions," Jonathan said from beside Ryan. "We've had all of it reviewed internally. Everything is compliant. We have no doubt," Gerald said carefully. "The question isn't compliance. The question is, and I'm going to be direct, because I think that serves everyone, the question is about the origin of those funds." Specifically, whether the vehicle behind those capital injections has now changed its position with regard to your company. Ryan looked at Gerald Sim. He felt something cold move through his chest. Changed its position, he said. Yes, sir. Gerald closed the folder. The Parker Family Trust, which appears to be the underlying source of several significant interventions in your company's financial history, has, within the last 30 days, quietly indicated to several institutional parties that it is withdrawing its informal support of Mitchell Technologies' credit report. The room was very quiet. Ryan heard his own heartbeat, loud, too loud for a boardroom. Say that again, he said. Gerald said it again. Ryan sat with the architecture of what it meant, the Parker Family Trust. Emma's family, Emma's money. The money she had never told him about, coming from the family she had never fully described to him, flowing quietly through structures he had never known existed, into the walls of his company so that his company could keep standing. And now it was withdrawing, not explosively, not loudly, not with a press release or a legal filing, just quietly, the way Emma did everything, the way a woman who understands real power operates not with noise but with the simple, devastating act of stopping. When did this start? Ryan asked. Gerald paused. The indications began appearing approximately 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago. Ryan did the math without wanting to. 6 weeks ago was the week after Bellini's. The week after Emma Parker had signed those papers and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. She didn't. Ryan started and then stopped. Jonathan looked at him. Ryan picked up the glass of water in front of him. Put it down without drinking. This is my company, he said. Not to Gerald, not to Jonathan, to no one in particular. I built this company. No one in the room answered him. No one needed to. He drove back to the office in silence. His driver, a quiet man named Percy, who had worked for him for 3 years, knew better than to talk. Ryan sat in the back seat and looked out the window at Chicago moving past him and felt the particular sensation of a man who has been living inside a story about himself and has just discovered the story had a different author. He called Marcus from the car. She's pulling it, Ryan said when Marcus answered. The trust, her family. They've been holding up half my company for 6 years and she's pulling it. Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. Then, are you sure she's actively pulling it, or is it just stopping? What's the difference? The difference is everything, Marcus said quietly. Actively pulling it means she's going after you. Stopping means she's just living her life. And the infrastructure that depended on her being part of yours is feeling the absence. Ryan pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. I didn't know, Marcus. I know you didn't. Did you? A long pause. I suspected something, not the specifics. But I knew there were angles to Emma Parker that you had never bothered to look at closely. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were so certain you had her figured out, Marcus said. There was no accusation in it, just honesty, delivered the way Marcus always delivered things, straight, without decoration. You had made up your mind about who she was a long time ago, Ryan, and once you decide something like that about a person, you stop seeing the evidence that contradicts it. Ryan was quiet. What do I do? He finally said. Right now, you figure out which relationships can be stabilized independent of the trust. You get Jonathan to map the exposure. You treat it like any other business problem, a pause. And then separately, you figure out what you actually want to do about Emma. I need to talk to her. Maybe, Marcus said, but not for the business reason. If you go to her about the business, you've lost before you start. She'll know exactly why you're there, and it'll tell her everything she needs to know about whether you've changed. Ryan stared out the window. Has he, Marcus asked. Has he what? Changed? Have you? Ryan opened his mouth. Closed it. The honest answer arrived before he could dress it up in something more presentable. I don't know yet, he said. At least that's real, Marcus said. That's the first real thing you've said in about 2 months. The next 2 weeks were the most professionally turbulent of the recurs since the nearly catastrophic Series B period in 2020, which he's understood in a completely way than he ever had before. Jonathan Hale produced the exposure map Ryan asked for, and it was not a comfortable document to read. The Parker Family Trust had not simply provided capital at critical moments. It had, through the informal credibility its association lent to Mitchell Technologies, influenced decisions by other institutional partners in ways that were difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore once you knew to look for them. Harrington Group confirmed they were not renewing. 2 smaller advisory partners sent polite emails within the same week that said nothing directly but communicated everything through what they didn't say. A funding conversation with a Boston-based firm that had been progressing well went suddenly, inexplicably cold, no stated reason, just a slowing of responses that Ryan and Jonathan both understood. The company was not in danger of collapse. Ryan needed to understand that clearly, and Jonathan made sure he did. Mitchell Technologies was profitable. The product was good. The team was strong. But the ecosystem of confidence that surrounded the company, the invisible network of institutional credibility that made other serious investors comfortable, had depended, more than Ryan had ever known, on something that was no longer there. "It's like the tide went out," Jonathan said one morning, "and we're discovering which parts of the structure were built on sand." Ryan nodded. He didn't say what he was thinking. He was thinking about a woman who had built her part of the structure out of love and got nothing for it. Not credit, not acknowledgement, not even awareness. And who had nonetheless, upon leaving, taken nothing from him intentionally. She had simply stopped giving. He found himself in unguarded moments feeling something he hadn't expected to feel about Emma Parker. Not guilt, exactly, though there was plenty of that. Something older and more complicated, something that had no clean name. He started asking questions about her. Quietly. Not through professional channels. He wasn't ready to make it a business inquiry. Some part of him understanding that Marcus was right about the danger of that, but through the organic way. Information travels in a city like Chicago when you know enough people. He asked Bradford Chase's assistant, who seemed to know everyone's business. He asked Priya, who ran in wide circles and had a sharp memory for details. What he heard surprised him. Emma Parker had not retreated. She had not gone home to whatever wealthy family structure she'd hidden from him and dissolved into old money comfort. She had apparently moved, taken an apartment on the north side. Returned to the nonprofit arts world, but not in the administrative role she'd held when Ryan met her. She had taken a director's level position and he'd never heard of the Whitmore Foundation that worked at the intersection of art and community development. She gave a keynote, Priya told him, with a look Ryan couldn't quite interpret. "The Midwest Philanthropy Summit, last month. I have a friend who was there." She said Emma was remarkable. Remarkable, Ryan repeated. Her words. Priya studied him for a moment. "I saw photos from the event." She looked incredible. Happy. Like a person who had put something down and could finally breathe. Ryan recognized that description. He'd used it about himself in the first week after Bellini's, standing at his apartment window with his coffee. "I can finally breathe." Apparently Emma could too. The difference was Emma looked like she meant it. He found the keynote online that evening. Someone had filmed it on a phone, amateur footage, slightly shaky, and posted it to a professional network. Emma stood at a podium in front of a room of a few hundred people in a deep green dress, and she spoke without notes, with the kind ease that comes not from performance, but from genuine knowledge, from someone who has something real to say and trusts themselves to say it. She spoke about invisible contributions, about the people who build foundations that others stand on without knowing, about the difference between credit and value, about knowing your own worth even when no one around you has bothered to calculate it. Ryan watched the whole thing twice. He sat in his apartment afterward with the laptop opened to the personal frame, Emma stepping away from the podium, people around her rising to their feet, and he felt something break open in his chest. Not dramatically, more like ice in late March. Something that had been solid for a very long time beginning, slowly, inevitably, to give. He had looked at this woman every day for 11 years, slept beside her, eaten breakfast across from her, watched her read and cook and laugh and worry and hope. And he had somehow managed, through the particular arrogance of a man who has convinced himself he earned everything he has, to never once actually see her. He saw her now, and the distance between now and 11 years ago was the loneliest distance he had ever felt. He picked up his phone. He scrolled to her contact. He held the phone for a long time, the way a man holds a door handle before he's decided whether to open the door. Then he put the phone down, not because he didn't want to call, because Marcus was right. Because calling now, with the business collapsing around the edges, with the Parker family trust withdrawing, with everything professionally at stake, would tell Emma exactly the wrong thing. Would confirm every fear she had ever had about whether Ryan valued her as a person or as a resource. He needed to be better than that. The question was whether he knew how. He called his mother instead. Carol Mitchell picked up on the second ring, the way she always did, as if she'd been waiting. "Ryan," she said. "Hi, Mom." A pause. "What's wrong?" "Why does something have to be wrong? Because you only call me at 10:30 at night when something is wrong." What happened? He almost gave her the business version. The clean, professional version with the institutional language and the reasonable distance. Instead he said, "I think I made a terrible mistake." Carol Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "About Emma, it wasn't a question. Yeah, he said. I know, she said. You know, Ryan. His mother's voice was gentle but completely without softness, the way only a mother's voice can be. I knew the night you told me you were getting divorced. I didn't say anything because you were a grown man, and it wasn't my place, and I knew you had to figure it out yourself. But yes, I knew. She never told you? About her family? About any of it? No, Emma never told me anything she didn't intend to tell me. That woman was private in ways most people can't understand. A pause. But I didn't need to know about her family to know who she was. I knew who she was the first time I met her. I knew she was the kind of person who loves quietly. And those are the ones you cannot replace. Ryan pressed his hand over his eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You probably can't fix it, his mother said. Not unkindly, just honestly. Fixing EMSA put back the way it was. What was is gone. The question is whether there's something new to build. And you can't answer that question until you've dealt with the man in the mirror first. What does that mean? It means that the problem was never Emma. Ryan, the problem was what you decided to believe about yourself when the money came. And until you've really sat with that, really understood it, not just intellectually, but in your gut, you have no business showing up at that woman's door. Ryan didn't say anything for a while. He sat with it, with all of it. I'm scared, he said. And it was possibly the most honest thing he had said in 2 years. Good, Carol said. Fear means you're paying attention. It means something matters. Another pause. Get some sleep. And Ryan, whatever else happens, I love you, but you need to do the work. The real work, not the business kind. He said goodnight and put the phone down. Outside his apartment window, Chicago was still going. Still loud, still bright, still completely indifferent to the interior lives of the people moving through it. Ryan Mitchell sat in the quiet of his own space and felt, for perhaps the first time, the true weight of everything he had dismantled. Not just the marriage. Not just the business ecosystem that was quietly recalibrating itself in the absence of the woman he'd dismissed. The image, the story. The entire architecture of the self-made man who needed no one and owed nothing to anyone and had built his empire through pure force of will. That story was a lie, and the woman who knew it was a lie, who had known it for years and chosen to protect him from the knowledge anyway, because she loved him, was living her life somewhere on the north side of this city, standing at podiums and being risen to her feet, finally taking up the space she had always deserved. Ryan Mitchell sat alone in his apartment and did something he had not done in a very long time. He stopped performing, he stopped calculating, he stopped managing the story. He sat with the truth, and the truth was simple and terrible and clarifying in the way only true things can be. He had not lost a wife who held him back. He had abandoned a woman who had quietly, invisibly at every critical moment held everything up, and somewhere between that understanding and whatever came next, Ryan Mitchell was going to have to find out whether there was still a person inside him worth the finding. The work Carol Mitchell told her son to do was not the kind that came with a deadline or a deliverable. It had no quarterly review, no milestone chart, no metric by which Ryan could measure whether he was making progress and present the findings to a room full of people who would nod and applaud. It was the kind of work that happened at 6 in the morning before the city woke up, sitting with a cup of coffee that went cold while he stared at nothing. The kind that happened in the car on the way to meetings he could no longer fully concentrate on, because some part of his mind had become permanently occupied with a question he kept circling without landing on. How does a man become someone he didn't intend to become and not notice until the damage is already done? He started paying attention to the moments he'd glossed over. The small ones, the ones that hadn't seemed significant at the time, because he was always moving too fast to let significance catch up with him. He remembered a dinner party Bradford Chase's place, 2 years into the period when things had started to shift. Emma had been seated next to a woman named Sylvia, the wife of a hedge fund manager, who had spent 40 minutes talking about a charitable initiative she was leading, and Emma had listened with her whole body the way she always listened, and at some point she had said something, a single sentence about organizational structure that Ryan hadn't fully caught, because he was talking to Bradford across the table, and Sylvia had looked at Emma with a sudden, sharp interest, like someone who had just realized the person they were speaking to was operating on a different level than the conversation as she had suggested. Ryan had noticed Sylvia's expression and thought nothing of it. He had not asked Emma what she said. He had not thought to. He thought about it now, in the cold coffee mornings that January became. He thought about it and felt the particular nausea of a man who realizes he has been walking past something valuable for years and cataloging it as furniture. Jonathan Hale continued mapping the business exposure. The picture that emerged was not catastrophic, but it was serious, and the seriousness has a specific shape. The relationships that were cooling were the ones that had been warm in ways Ryan had never fully understood, sustained by a credibility that he now knew had a source he'd never bothered to investigate. Two board-level advisors whose involvement had always seemed to Ryan like simple professional enthusiasm had, it turned out, been introduced to the company through a channel that traced, eventually, to the Parker network, not directly, not transparently, but there underneath, the way the structure of a building is there underneath the walls. "There's something else," Jonathan said on a Thursday morning in mid-January, 3 weeks after the first Midwest meeting. He had the expression Ryan had started to recognize, the one that meant the news was going to require Ryan to sit with something uncomfortable. Ryan said, "Tell me." I had made to a deeper pull. On the Parker family trust specifically, on Emma. Jonathan placed a folder on the desk. "Before she married you, she had her own professional history. Significant, the kind we would have known about immediately if we had ever looked." Ryan looked at the folder. "How significant?" "She spent 3 years after Northwestern working inside the Parker Group, a private investment division. Not in an administrative capacity." Jonathan paused. "She was an analyst, a senior one by the time she was 24. The people she worked with during that period describe her, and these are people I've spoken to directly in the last 2 as the Schwarz capital allocation minds they encountered at that level." Ryan did not move. "She left the Parker Group at 26, Jonathan continued. "Voluntarily. Took a position in nonprofit arts administration that paid roughly 8% of what she had been making. She apparently told her colleagues she wanted to do something that felt real." He paused. "That was 6 months before you met her." Ryan looked at the folder without opening it. "She walked away from all of it. She walked away from everything," Jonathan said. "The money, the title, the professional identity, all of it. And she built a completely different life." He paused again. "And then she met you. And she watched you build a company that needed things she knew how to provide. And she provided them without ever telling you she could." The room held the silence for a moment. "Why?" Ryan said. The word came out smaller than he intended. Jonathan looked at him steadily. "I think you know why." Ryan did know. He'd known it since the night he watched the keynote video twice on his laptop. He'd known it in the way you know things that you wish you could unknow, because the knowing is the most expensive he ever paid for. She loved him. That was why. She loved the man she met in that coffee shop in Wicker Park, who was struggling and honest and hadn't yet constructed the armor that success would eventually hand him. She loved him enough to protect him without letting the protection diminish him. She understood that Ryan Mitchell needed to believe in his own capability, that the belief was structural, that without it he would not function, and so she had built the scaffold invisibly and let him believe the building stood on his own strength. She had loved him in the deepest, most demanding way a person can love someone. Not the love that announces itself, the love that simply does the work and asks for nothing. And Ryan had looked at that love and decided it was ordinariness. He opened the folder finally, read through the pages Jonathan had assembled. Professional references from the Parker Group years. A citation in a private equity industry journal from 2017, Emma Parker Whitfield, cited as a contributor to a structural analysis that Ryan now realized had influenced a category of capital decisions he was familiar with from his own industry. There was a photograph paper-clipped to one of the pages. A professional photo clearly from the Parker Group era. Emma maybe 23 or 24, in a sharp blade, looking directly at the camera with the same expression she always had, steady, present, paying full attention. But in this context, with this new information surrounding it, the expression looked different to Ryan. It looked like someone who had chosen, with full awareness of what she was giving up, to put it all aside. For him, Ryan closed the folder. "Thank you, Jonathan," he said. His voice was level. He had gotten very good at level. But Jonathan, who had worked with this man for 6 years and paid close attention, saw something in Ryan Mitchell's face that he had never seen there before. He saw a man who had finally run out of ways to protect himself from himself. Jonathan left. Ryan sat alone, and for the second time in 3 months, Ryan Mitchell did not perform, did not manage, did not calculate. He sat in the truth of what he had done, and he let it be exactly as heavy as it was. It was very heavy. The call from Bradford Chase came the following Tuesday, and it was the call Ryan had been half expecting and wholly dreading since the first Midwest meeting. Bradford's voice was different from usual. The canon law energy was absent. He was direct in a way that men like Bradford Chase are only direct when they've made a decision they're not entirely comfortable with but have committed to anyway. "Ryan," he said, "I need to talk to you about the Lakeside project. The Lakeside project was a commercial real estate tech venture that Ryan and Bradford had been developing together for 8 months. It was not part of Mitchell Technologies proper, but it was connected a side collaboration that had professional momentum and the potential to become something significant. Bradford had other investors lined up behind it, people who looked to Bradford's judgment, the way investors often look to the most confident voice in the room. "What about it?" Ryan said. "I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve that. I've had some conversations in the last few weeks with people in our circle, and the picture that's emerging around Mitchell Technologies, around the questions about the capital structure, it's creating some hesitation." A pause. "I can't bring hesitant money into Lakeside. You know how this works." Ryan knew exactly how it worked. Confidence was contagious in the investment world, and so was its absence. The quiet withdrawal of the Parker network had created a ripple, and that ripple was now reaching Bradford Chase's shore. "How much time do I have?" Ryan asked. 30 days, Bradford said. "If the institutional picture stabilizes, we proceed. If it doesn't," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. After he hung up, Ryan sat very still. He looked at the calendar on his desk, January 15th, February 15th. He thought about what Marcus had said. "Don't go to her for the business reason. If you do, you've already lost." He thought about what his mother had said. "You have no business showing up at that woman's door until you've dealt with the man in the mirror." He thought about the folder Jonathan had put on his desk, about Emma Parker Whitfield at 23, looking at a camera in a boardroom, about to walk away from everything she had in order to live a life that felt real. He thought about himself at 26, sitting at a coffee shop counter at midnight with a laptop full of numbers that didn't work, and a woman 2 seats down who laughed at something in a book, and how he had introduced himself badly and she had been kind about it. He picked up his phone. He scrolled to Marcus. He called. Marcus picked up on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "Bradford gave me 30 days. I heard." "Of course you heard." Ryan exhaled. "Marcus, I need to find her, not for the business. For I need to, I have to say something to her, not about the company. About what I did. Are you ready for that?" "No," Ryan said. "But I think I've been as ready as I'm going to get by sitting alone in my apartment." Another pause. Then Marcus said, "I know where she is." Ryan went completely still. "What?" "I've known for a while. I ran into someone from the Whitmore Foundation at an event in December. They mentioned Emma by name, said she was transforming the place." He paused. "I didn't tell you because you weren't ready. I needed to hear you say what you just said, not for the company, before I'd feel right about giving you the address." Ryan's voice was tight. "And now I believe you." Marcus gave him the address. An office on the north side near Lincoln Park. "She's usually there by 8:30. She takes her lunch outside, weather permitting, at the small park 2 blocks east. Alone, usually." He paused. "Ryan, I'm telling you this because I think you need to have this conversation. But I'm going to say one more thing and I need you to hear it. Say it. If you walk in there thinking about what you need, even unconsciously, she will know. Emma Parker has always known. It's one of the things you never noticed about her. She reads people the way some people read weather. She'll know the second you walk in whether you're there for you or for her. And if it's for you, even a little, it'll be the last time she sees you." Ryan held the phone. "So what do I do?" "You figure out what you would need to say to her if the company was fine. If Bradford Chase had called to say everything was great, and there was no professional reason on earth to reach out. What would you say then?" Ryan thought about it, not for a long time. The answer was already there. It had been there since the cold coffee mornings, since the keynote video, since Jonathan's folder, since his mother's voice at 10:30 at night saying, "The one's candle you cannot place." "I'd tell her I'm sorry," Ryan said, "and I'd mean it in a way I haven't meant anything in a very long time." "Then start there," Marcus said. "Just start there." He went on a Wednesday morning. He did not call ahead. He did not send an email through the Whitmore Foundation's contact page, which he had found and stared at for 20 minutes the night before. He drove himself, not Percy himself, and he parked, and he walked into a building he had no appointment in and asked at the front desk for Emma Parker. The woman at the desk looked at him with a professionally neutral expression and asked his name. He gave it. She asked him to wait and picked up an internal phone. Ryan stood in the small reception area and felt his heart doing something irregular and uncooperative. He was 43 years old, had negotiated deals worth 8 figures, had spoken to rooms full of skeptical investors, and held his position under pressure that would have broken less determined men. And he was standing in a nonprofit arts foundation reception area, feeling like a man who had been called to the principal's office and wasn't sure he could argue his way out of this one. He waited 6 minutes. He counted them, and then a door opened and Emma Parker walked into the reception area and stopped when she saw him, and for a single suspended second neither of them said anything. She looked different. That was his first thought. And then his second thought corrected the first. She didn't look different. She looked like herself. Like the version of herself that had been there all along, that he had somehow kept missing. She was in a dark navy blazer over a simple blouse, her hair pulled back. She was looking at him with those steady dark eyes, and her expression was not cold, not angry, not the crumbling grief he had half expected, half dreaded, half secretly wanted, because at least grief would mean the feelings were still there. Her expression was measured. It was the expression of someone who has processed something at considerable internal cost and arrived, on the other side, at a place of quiet but absolute clarity. Ryan, she said. The way she said his name had always been particular. She had a way of saying it that made it feel like a question and a statement at the same time. It still did. Emma, he said. I know I don't have any right to be here. She said nothing. Just waited. It was a very Emma thing to do. I'm not here about the company, he said. He needed her to know that first, before anything else. I know about the trust. I know about your family. I know about what you did, what you've been doing. He paused. I'm not here because of any of that. Something shifted in her eyes. Not warmth exactly, more like attention. The kind of attention that means I'm listening, but I'm not yet deciding what I think. Can we talk somewhere, he said. She studied him for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she said to the woman at the desk, I'll be in the courtyard. Hold my 9:30 if I'm not back. She led him outside. They walked without speaking for a block and a half, and then she stopped at the park Marcus had described and sat down on a bench and looked at him. He sat down on the same bench, 2 feet of space between them, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the city moved around them in its indifferent January way. How are you? He asked, and he meant it in the largest possible sense. Better than I've been in years, she said straightforward. Not said to wound him, though he felt it anyway. Simply true. I believe it, he said. I watched the keynote, someone posted it. I watched it twice, her expression shifted slightly. Why? Because I had never heard you talk like that. With that much authority, with that much yourself. He stopped. Started again. I realized I had never given you the space to. Or maybe you had the space and I just wasn't in the room when it happened. He looked at his hands. I don't know which is worse. Emma was quiet for a moment. What do you want to say to me, Ryan? Really? He looked at her. I want to say I'm sorry. And I want to say it in a way that doesn't ask you for anything in return. I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm not here to, I don't know what I'm entitled to hope for. But it isn't forgiveness. That's not mine to ask. He felt something loosening in his chest as he spoke. The way things loosen when they've been held too tight for too long. I want you to know that I understand what I did, not just the divorce. The years before it. The way I looked at you and decided I knew who you were without ever actually looking. The things I said about how you looked. The way I made you feel like you were less than you were. Emma, you were never less. You were always, I was the one who was less. And I was too afraid to look at it clearly, so I made it about you instead. He stopped talking. Emma was looking at him steadily. That's the truest thing you've said, she said quietly. In a very long time, the silence that followed was not comfortable, but it was real. Ryan sat in it without trying to fill it. I knew about the keynote invitation, Emma said after a moment. I almost didn't accept it. 6 months ago, I would not have. 6 months ago, I was still, she paused, chose her words carefully. I had spent 11 years being careful about taking up space. I told myself it was because I didn't want to overshadow you. But that was only partly true. She looked at a point somewhere beyond him. The other part was that somewhere along the way I had started to believe your version of me. The quiet one, the ordinary one, the one who didn't quite fit. She looked back at him. That's the thing about being told something long enough. Eventually you stop needing someone else to say it. The words landed in Ryan's chest like something thrown from height. Emma, he said, I'm not saying it to punish you, she said. I'm saying it because I think you should know the full weight of it. Not just the business side, the human side. She looked at him steadily. You didn't just leave a marriage, Ryan. You left me in a version of myself that wasn't mine. He could not speak for a moment. Literally could not find the shape of a word. I'm finding my way back to myself, she said. I've been finding it since I walked out of that restaurant. And it's hard and it's terrifying and it's also the most alive I've felt in years. She paused. But it should not have taken a divorce for me to feel entitled to be myself. No, Ryan said. It shouldn't have, and that's on me, all of it. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The way Emma had always looked at things, with full attention, without armor. You look different, she said. I feel different. Different how? He thought about the cold coffee mornings, the mirror, the folder on his desk, his mother's voice. Smaller, he said finally, in a way that I think might actually be the right size. Something moved across Emma's face. Not a smile, something quieter, like recognition. Do you know why I never told you about my family, she said. About the Parker Group, about any of it? I think I do now, he said. You wanted someone to love you without a reason. Without a financial reason, she clarified. Without the weight of all that expectation and legacies, and the particular kind of attention that family money attracts. I spent my entire childhood being known as George Parker's daughter. Everything I did was filtered through that. I left because I wanted to find out who I was without it. She paused. And then I met you. And you were this person who was building something from nothing, who believed in himself before anyone told him he should, and you were real in a way that the world I came from never felt. And I fell in love with that. With you, the real you. Ryan's throat was tight. And then the money came, he said. And then the money came, she said. And the real you got harder to find. They sat with that for a moment. I should not have helped the company without telling you, she said. I know that. It wasn't honest, but at the time it felt like I couldn't let stand by and watch something you'd built from nothing collapse, because some circumstances that could be addressed. I had the means to address them, so I did, she paused. And I kept doing it, not to control you, not to hold something over you. Because I believed in what you were building. Because I still believed in you, even when you had stopped seeing me. Ryan pressed his hands together. Pressed them hard. You loved me better than I deserved. Yes, she said simply. Not unkindly. Just true, and I threw it away, yes. The word hit differently than it might have if she'd softened it. But he didn't want her to soften it. The unpadded truth was what he'd come here for. What happens now, he asked. To us, I mean, if there even is an us in any sense. Emma was quiet for a long moment. A couple walked past them on the path, somewhere nearby. A dog barked once and stopped. I don't know, she said finally. I genuinely don't know. And I want you to hear that not as a maybe, not as hope, but as an honest answer. She looked at him. The person who signed those papers in Bellini's is not the person sitting here right now. I know that. I can see that, and that matters. She paused. But I am not the same person either. I am not the woman who would set herself aside to protect your confidence. I am not the woman who would go quiet because you needed to feel like the loudest thing in the room. She looked directly into his eyes. If there is ever any version of an us, it will have to be built by two people who actually see each other. Completely, not the version they find convenient, I know, Ryan said. Do you? She wasn't aggressive, she was simply asking. The way Emma asked things with genuine curiosity and no interest in performing the question. I'm learning to, he said. It's the most important thing I've learned to do in years. Maybe ever. She held his gaze for a moment, and then something in her face settled not into warmth yet, but into something that was at least open. A door that had been closed and was not yet open, but had, perhaps, been unlocked from the inside. Go build yourself back, she said. Not the company, you the man. She stood from the bench. I need to get back. He stood too. Is there any version of this where I could, Ryan? She stopped him gently. Don't ask me questions I can't answer yet. Let the work speak. She turned and walked back toward the Whitmore Foundation. Ryan stood at the bench and watched her go, and this time, unlike Bellini's, he was the one watching someone walk away. And this time he understood with every nerve in his body exactly what that felt like. He drove home in a silence that was different from the silence of the drive to the restaurant 4 months ago. This silence was not satisfaction, it was not liberation. It was not the absence of something unwanted. It was the first silence of a man who had run out of lies to tell himself and was, slowly and painfully and without guarantee of outcome, beginning to figure out what was left underneath. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Bradford Chase, he let it ring, then picked up the call back immediately after. Bradford, he said. Listen, I've been thinking, Bradford said. The 30-day window, I think we can work through this. The fundamentals on Lakeside are still, Bradford, Ryan said. I need to take a step back from Lakeside. Silence. What? Not permanently. But right now. There are things I'm working through, and I can't give Lakeside the sensitive attention that's... He paused. You should know that whatever happens with the capital structure questions around Mitchell Technologies, the product is sound, the team is exceptional. The company can stand on what it's actually built. It may take time for that to become clear to the market. But it's true. Bradford was quiet for a moment. Ryan, that's a significant decision. I know. Are you okay? No, Ryan said. But I'm working on it. After he hung up, Ryan sat in the parked car outside his apartment building for a while. He thought about what Emma had said. Let the work speak. He had spent 15 years building a company, 14-hour days, sacrificed friendships, family dinners, sleep, peace of mind. He had built and built and built, and he had called it success, and for a while he had believed that word covered everything. He understood now that the most important construction project of his life had nothing to do with Mitchell Technologies. And it was going to take longer than 30 days. It was going to take everything he had. But for the first time in a very long time, Ryan Mitchell did not feel the urge to run from the work. He felt underneath the fear and the grief and the hard clarity of everything he had broken, something that had no clean name but felt faintly like the beginning of something real. He got out of the car, walked into his building, called his mother. "I talked to her," he said when Carol picked up. Carol was quiet for a second. "How did it go?" "She told me to go build myself back," he said. Another pause. "That sounds like Emma." "Yeah," he said. "It does." He stopped in the elevator, looking at his own reflection in the mirrored door. "Mom, do you think it's possible to actually become someone better than you were? Not just say it, actually do it." Carol Mitchell took a breath. "I think it's the hardest thing a person can do," she said. "I think most people decide it's too hard and stop. I think the ones who don't stop, yes, I think yes." She paused. "The question is never whether it's possible. The question is whether you have the stomach for what it actually costs." Ryan looked at his reflection. "I'm about to find out," he said. The first thing Ryan did the morning after he talked to Emma was cancel 3 meetings he had been treating as important and call a therapist. He had never seen a therapist in his life. He had always categorized therapy the way certain men of his generation and disposition categorized most forms of vulnerability as something other people needed. People who hadn't figured out how to push through things on their own. He understood, sitting in his apartment at 7:15 on a Thursday morning in late January, that this particular belief had been one of the most expensive he had ever held. The therapist's name was Dr. Patricia Owens. She came recommended by his primary care physician, who had noticed at Ryan's annual physical 2 weeks earlier that his blood pressure was elevated and his sleep was poor, and that the answers he gave to routine wellness questions had the quality of a man reading from a script he no longer believed in. She had asked him directly, "Is everything okay? And I mean actually okay, not professionally okay." Ryan had paused long enough for the answers to be clear without words. Dr. Owens had an office in Lincoln Park, a detail Ryan noticed only because Lincoln Park was 2 miles from the Whitmore Foundation. He told himself this was not why he chose her. He was not entirely sure he was telling himself the truth. She was a black woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck, and a manner of listening that reminded Ryan, uncomfortably and immediately, of Emma. Not because they were similar in personality, they weren't, but because both of them listened without filling the silence. They let the silence be what it was, a space where the honest thing would surface if you stopped trying to manage it. The first session was 50 minutes of Ryan talking more than he had talked about himself in years. He told her about the divorce, about the company, about the Parker Family Trust and what Jonathan had discovered, about the morning he watched Emma's keynote twice, about the bench in the park near the Whitmore Foundation and what Emma had said. Let the work speak. Dr. Owens listened to all of it. At the end, she asked him one question. "When you imagine being a better version of yourself," she said, "what does that person do differently on a Tuesday?" Ryan looked at her. "What? Not at a big moment, not at a crisis point or a decision that feels historic. Just a Tuesday, regular day. What does the better version of you do differently?" He didn't have an answer. He sat with the absence of the answer for an uncomfortable minute. "That's your homework," she said. He thought about it for 3 days. He thought about it on the drive to the office and in the elevator and during meetings where half his mind was on the question instead of the agenda. He thought about it at night when sleep came slowly and the city outside his window did its indifferent glittering. On the 3rd day, sitting at his desk before anyone else arrived, he wrote it down, not on a slide deck, not in a structured document, just on a yellow legal pad, in handwriting that was messier than anything he'd produced professionally in years. "On a regular Tuesday, a better version of me listens to finish hearing rather than to formulate the next thing to say. He pays attention to the person in the room who isn't talking, not just the one who is. He doesn't assign value to people based on what they can do for his goals. He calls his mother for a reason other than needing something. He admits when he doesn't know something without framing it as a temporary condition. He doesn't look at a woman and evaluate her against a standard she never agreed to be evaluated by. He put the pen down, looked at the list, felt the particular discomfort of a man confronting the gap between he had been and who he intended to be, understanding for the first time that the gap was not a project he could complete and present. It was a practice, it had no finish line. It was simply the direction he chose to walk in every Tuesday for the rest of his life. He brought the list to the next session with Dr. Owens. She read it without comment. Then she looked up and asked, "Which one is hardest?" He knew immediately. "Admitting when I don't know something," he said, "especially in front of people who depend on me." "Why?" "Because the whole structure is built on the assumption that I know," she said. "The company, the team, the investors. It's all they're there because they believe I have a vision and the capability to execute it. If I start showing the cracks are already there, Doctor." Owen said quietly, "They were always there. The question is whether you carry them alone or whether you let the people who are actually there to help you do their jobs." She paused. "There's a version of leadership that's about performance, projecting certainty to maintain confidence. And there's a version that's about trust, letting people see enough of the real picture that they can actually be useful." She tilted her head slightly. "Which version built the company you think you built?" He knew what she was getting at. The company he thought he had built alone had not been built alone. The people around him, Jonathan, his team, the advisors who had believed in the product, they had been real. Their contributions were real, and Emma's invisible scaffolding had been real. The whole edifice had been collaborative in ways he had never acknowledged, because collaboration felt, to the story he told about himself, like weakness. "I have to change the story," he said. "About what? Who I am? About how I got here." He paused, the whole self-made narrative. "It's not exactly false, but it's incomplete enough that the missing pieces change the meaning, Doctor." Owens nodded once. "What does it feel like to say that out loud?" Ryan thought about it honestly. "Like losing something," he said, "and like not having to hold it up anymore. Both of those things can be true at the same time," she said. February arrived, the 30-day window Bradford had given him for Lakeside passed, and Bradford, to his credit, called rather than emailed to tell Ryan he was proceeding with different partners. He was not unkind about it. He was direct and clear and said that if circumstances changed, the door was not permanently closed, and Ryan believed him. It was the first professional loss Ryan had absorbed in years without the automatic defensive response, the blaming of external factors, the strategic reframing, the immediate pivot to what came next. He absorbed it. He let it be a loss. He told Jonathan honestly that he had made decisions that contributed to it, and that the next several months were going to require a different kind of leadership than Mitchell Technologies had seen from him. Jonathan looked at him for a moment, then said, "I appreciate you telling me that directly." "You deserved the direct version a long time ago," Ryan said. The institutional picture began slowly to stabilize. Not because the Parker Trust returned, it didn't, and Ryan neither expected nor sought that, but because the product was genuinely capable. And when Ryan stopped performing and started actually working with his people rather than above them, the quality of their collective decision-making improved in ways that were measurable within weeks. Harrington Group was replaced by a smaller firm with a sharper focus that Jonathan had identified through his own network. The relationship with First Midwest Bank was repaired through a combination of transparency, Ryan presenting the full capital history honestly, without spin, and the simple evidence of a profitable product line that did not need support structures it hadn't earned. It was slower than Ryan was used to. He had always operated at a pace that felt urgent, that produced energy, that gave him the sensation of forward momentum even when direction was unclear. Learning to work at the speed of trust rather than the speed of performance was one of the most uncomfortable professional adjustments he had ever made. But it was real. For the first time in years, what Mitchell Technologies was building felt genuinely real. 6 weeks after the bench conversation in the park, Ryan ran into Emma. He was not looking for her. He needed to believe that, and he also needed to be honest enough with himself to acknowledge that his choice of a coffee shop 6 blocks from the Whitmore Foundation, while technically driven by a client meeting in that neighborhood, was not entirely innocent of the geography. He was waiting at the counter for his order when he heard her voice behind him. She was with someone, a woman in her 40s who had the assured, purposeful energy of a person whose professional life involved making things happen. They were talking about a grant application, something about community engagement metrics, and Emma's voice had that particular quality it had at the keynote, confident, precise, fully inhabiting what she was saying. Ryan turned. Emma saw him at the same moment. There was a beat, a single suspended second where both of them processed the situation. Then Emma said something brief to her colleague and stepped toward him. "Ryan," she said. "Emma, I'm sorry, I'm not, this isn't." He stopped. "Try it again. I have a client meeting in the neighborhood. I'm not following you." Something in her face suggested she had already decided that. I know, she said. How are you honestly? He looked at her. Slowly better. I'm seeing someone, a therapist. I know I just wanted you to know that the work is real. She studied him. The same full attention look. I'm glad, she said. And it had the quality of something she meant. How are you? He asked. Really good, she said. And then, unexpectedly, we're doing an event at the Whitmore next month. A fundraiser. There will be people there from the private investment world. The kind of connections I spent a lot of years pretending I didn't have. She paused. It feels strange to use them openly, but good strange. You don't have to hide anymore, he said. She looked at him. No, she said quietly, I don't. His order was called. He picked it up. He stood for a moment at the fork of whether to say more or to let this be enough. Emma, he said, I know you told me to let the work speak. I'm trying to respect that, but I want you to know not because I'm asking for anything. I want you to know that I think about the kind of person you are every day, and I think about the kind of person I was to you, and I don't let myself off the hook. He paused. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I can see the difference, Ryan, in how you're standing, in how you're talking. She tilted her head slightly. It's not everything, but it's something. She went back to her colleague. Ryan walked out of the coffee shop and stood on the sidewalk in February cold and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt since Wicker Park 12 years ago, something loose and terrifying and warm. He did not chase it. He walked to his client meeting and sat down and was present in a way he hadn't been in a professional setting in months because something had shifted in his chest that morning in that coffee shop, and the shift felt like permission not to hope for Emma back. Not yet, maybe not ever, but permission to be present. Permission to be real. Permission to stop using forward motion as a substitute for actual direction. The client meeting went well, better than well. The client said afterward that he felt like he was talking to a different person than the one he'd met 6 months ago, and Ryan, who would have received that observation defensively 6 months ago, said, I'm working on being a different person. Thank you for noticing. The client laughed, and then looked at Ryan and said, that's the most honest thing I've heard from a CEO in about 10 years. It's the next session with Dr. Owens. Ryan told her about the coffee shop. How did it feel, she asked. Like a test, he said. That I wasn't sure I was passing. Did you do what you came in wanting to do? I didn't ask for anything, he said. I just told her the truth, that the work is real. That I think about what I did. He paused and then I walked away. How did that feel? Terrible, he said. And right. At the same time. Dr. Owens nodded. That's usually what doing the right thing feels like, she said. It's rarely comfortable. It's often exactly what it needs to be. And it still hurts. Is that supposed to be reassuring? No, she said. It's supposed to be accurate. It was a real laugh, surprised out of him, and she smiled at it. And he thought, this is what Emma used to do, surprise the laugh out of him, before the armor, before the money made him heavy. March came. The days started getting longer in the particular way Chicago days do in early spring, slowly and then all at once, as if the city has been holding its breath through the worst of winter and finally exhales. Ryan's mother came to visit. She stayed 4 days, which was 2 days longer than she usually stayed, and considerably longer than Ryan had offered. But Carol Mitchell had decided she was staying nays, and that was what happened. She cooked in Ryan's apartment kitchen, which she had opinions about in terms of equipment and organization. She rearranged his refrigerator. She watched the evening news at a volume that Ryan found genuinely concerning for his hearing, and fell asleep post-hospitum by 8:30 on the first night, and woke up at 6 the next morning, making coffee with the purposeful energy of someone who had somewhere to be. It was exactly what he needed, and he hadn't known until it was happening. On the third evening, they sat at his kitchen table after dinner, and Carol said, "Tell me about Emma. How did the conversation go?" He told her. All of it, the bench. What Emma had said about spending 11 years setting herself aside. The coffee shop encounter. The moment in the doorway of the coffee shop when Emma had said it's not everything, but it's something. Carol listened. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. "She's a good woman," Carol said. "She's the best person I know," Ryan said. And the ease with which it came out surprised him. Not because it was new, because it was old. Because it was something he had known for a long time and had spent years burying under the weight of his own insecurity dressed up as discernment. "What are you going to do?" Carol asked. "Keep working," he said. Like she said, let the work speak, and if the work speaks and she still says no, Ryan held his mother's gaze. Then the work still mattered, he said. "I'm not doing this to get her back. I'm doing it because it's who I should have been all along." He paused. "Getting her back would be I can't even think about it clearly because I want it too much. So I'm trying not to think about it and just be the person. Carol reached across the table and put her hand over his. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The breakthrough, when it came, didn't announce itself. It was a Wednesday in late March. Ryan was at the Mitchell Technologies office staying late, working on a product roadmap with his lead engineer, a young woman named Sasha who had been with the company for 2 years and Ryan was increasingly aware, considerably smarter than the room usually gave her credit for. They were working through a technical problem that had been slowing a product update. And Ryan was doing something he would not have done 8 months ago. He was listening, not half listening while formulating his next point. Listening. Following Sasha's reasoning. Asking questions not to demonstrate that he understood but because he genuinely needed the answer. Sasha said in the middle of explaining an architecture decision, "You know, you're different in these meetings than you used to be." Ryan looked at her. "Good different or bad different?" She thought about it. "We feel like you're actually in the room," she said. "Before it felt like you were always somewhere else. Like these meetings were a stop on the way to where you were really going." "I was," he said honestly. "I'm sorry for that." She looked slightly surprised, the look of someone who had not expected that response and didn't quite know where to put it. "Okay," she said. "Well, don't be sorry, just keep doing this." He kept doing it. Meeting by meeting, decision by decision, Tuesday by Tuesday. He called his brother Derek, whom he had not called in 4 months, which was the longest they had gone without talking in their adult lives. Derek answered with, "Well, the prodigal brother." They talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Derek told him about his kids. Ryan listened. Really listened. He asked questions about his nephew's soccer season that had nothing to do with anything, except that he wanted to know the answer. When he hung up, he sat quietly for a minute and thought about all the phone calls he had deprioritized over the years because he had convinced himself that the business was the real relationship, that the deals were the thing that mattered, that personal life could be scheduled for later. There was no later, there was only the Tuesday you were actually in. The event at the Whitmore Foundation happened on the second Friday in April. Ryan knew the date because Emma had mentioned it at the coffee shop, and he had noted it without allowing himself to plan around it. But Marcus called him 3 days before and said, "The Whitmore Gala is Friday. I've been asked to attend. I have a connection to their board chair. Should I mention that to you, or should I not mention it?" "You're already mentioning it," Ryan said. "I'm aware. I don't have an invitation," Ryan said. "You don't need one. It's a public fundraiser. Anyone can buy a table." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "That feels like a line I shouldn't cross. She didn't invite me." "No," Marcus agreed. "She didn't," a pause, "but she told you about the event. To a person who didn't want her to know something, you don't mention the event. You just don't mention it." Ryan sat with that. "I'm not going to show up uninvited to an event at her workplace," he said. "That's not the work, that's pressure. And she's had enough of people's pressure." He paused. "Tell me how it goes." Marcus was quiet for a second. "That's growth," he said. "Don't make it weird. Too late, a beat. I'll tell you how it goes." Marcus called Saturday morning. "It was remarkable," he said. "She ran the whole thing. Spoke without notes for 20 minutes about the intersection of arts funding and community identity, and had the room completely. There were 3 major donors there who had never heard of the Whitmore Foundation before Friday, and by the end of the night all 3 had committed to multi-year gifts." He paused. "She is something else, Ryan." "I know," Ryan said. "Also," Marcus said, and his voice shifted slightly, became more careful. The way it did when he was delivering information, he wasn't sure how to frame. "She asked about you." Ryan stopped. "What?" "At the end of the night. I was saying goodbye and she said, 'How is he doing, really, not the company?' You." Ryan said nothing for a moment. He stood in his apartment with the phone pressed to his ear and felt something tectonic shift very slightly beneath the floor of his chest. "What did you tell her?" he said. "I told her the truth," Marcus said. "That you were doing the work, that you were different in ways I could see, that you had prioritized something other than the business outcome for the first time in your professional life." He paused, and she nodded, and she said, "Tell him I noticed." The words arrived like something that had been traveling a long distance. "Tell him I noticed." Ryan sat down on his couch. He put the phone on the cushion beside him. He pressed his hands together and looked at the ceiling of his apartment. She had noticed. Not the company's recovery, not at the institutional picture stabilizing. Him, the actual him, the man on the Tuesday. And she was paying attention the way Emma always paid attention, quietly, carefully, from a distance that gave her the perspective to see what was real and what was performance. He picked the phone back up. "Marcus," he said. "Yeah, I'm going to call her." A pause. "You think you're ready?" He thought about the legal pad, the sessions with Dr. Owens, the phone call with Derek, the Sasha conversation, the Bradford Chase loss he had absorbed without a defensive story. The cold coffee mornings, the mirror, all of it. I don't think readiness is the thing, he said. I think the question is whether I'm doing it for the right reason. And are you? Ryan looked at the room around him. His apartment. Clean, expensive, and for months the loneliest place he had ever occupied. He thought about Emma Parker at a podium with a room full of people rising to their feet. He thought about Emma on a bench in Lincoln Park, steady and clear, saying you lost me because you stopped seeing me. He thought about the man he had been and the man he was working to become and the enormous, frightening space between them that he was crossing, slowly one Tuesday at a time. Yes, he said, I think. Finally, then call her, Marcus said. But Ryan, whatever she says, you take it, you don't argue, you don't negotiate. You don't pitch. Whatever she gives you, you take it and you respect it. I know, do you? Yeah, Ryan said. I finally do. He ended the call with Marcus. He sat for another minute in the quiet of his apartment. He thought about a coffee shop in Wicker Park, a woman 2 seats down. A real laugh, unguarded, surprised out of her. A man who introduced himself badly and a woman who was kind about it. All of it had been real, before the money made him into someone who needed it not to be real. Before he had looked at genuine love and decided it wasn't glamorous enough to keep. He picked up the phone, he scrolled to Emma Parker. His finger hovered, he pressed call, it rang 3 times. 4. He was beginning to construct the architecture of a voicemail, choosing words when the line connected, silence for a moment. And then Emma's voice, quiet and even and fully present. Ryan, Emma, he said, Marcus told me that you asked about me. A pause. He wasn't supposed to do that, I know, Ryan said. But I'm glad he did, because I want to say something, and I need you to hear it without me having an agenda behind it. He steadied himself. I don't have an ask. I'm not calling because the company needs something or because I need something. I'm calling because you asked how I was really doing and because you deserve a real answer. She was quiet. Listening, I'm doing the work, he said, every day. Not perfectly, I make mistakes and then I catch them and I try again. I'm learning things about myself that I should have learned 20 years ago. I'm in therapy, I'm talking to my brother. I called my mother last week just to hear her voice. He paused. I am becoming slowly, honestly, without a guarantee of anything, a better version of the man you met in that coffee shop. The one who was broke and honest and hadn't yet convinced himself he was complete. Emma was quiet for what felt like a very long time. When she spoke, her voice was different, not cold. Not warm the way it used to be, not yet, but open. The door not thrown wide, but unmistakably carefully. Moved from its position. I noticed, she said, that's why I asked. Ryan closed his eyes. Can we have coffee, he said, not dinner, not anywhere fancy. Just coffee and talk, and I'll listen the whole time. If you want, I'm practicing listening, a breath on the line. And then quiet and deliberate and real. Saturday morning, she said, the place on Armitage, 9 o'clock, I'll be there, he said. Ryan, her voice was steady, come as yourself, not as the CEO, not as the man with the plan. Just yourself. That's the only version I'm bringing anymore, he said. And he meant it in every way a person can mean something. After they hung up, Ryan sat in his apartment for a long time. Not performing, not calculating, not managing the story. Just sitting with the fact that something had cracked open that he had thought, 4 months ago in a restaurant on the 42nd floor, was permanently closed. He did not know what Saturday would bring. He was not going to let himself skip ahead to outcomes. He was going to be in the Tuesday of it, the actual moment, the actual person across from him, the actual conversation. For the first time in years, that was enough. Ryan Mitchell did not sleep well Friday night. Not the anxious, spiraling insomnia of the months after Bellini's, where he would lie in the dark running business calculations as a way of avoiding the human ones. This was different. This was the sleeplessness of a man who is fully present in the moment he is living and cannot turn it because it actually matters. He lay awake and thought about Saturday morning, the way you think about something when you are no longer running from it but toward it, and the difference between those two directions is everything. He got up at 5:30, made coffee, stood at his window the way he had stood at his window the morning after Bellini's, except that the feeling in his chest was completely different. That morning 5 months ago, he had felt the lightness of a man who believed he had put something down. This morning, he felt the weight of a man who understood what he had put down and was asking, carefully and without guarantee, if he might be allowed to try again. He called Dr. Owen's answering service and left a message. Not because he needed guidance, because he wanted someone to know. He said simply, "It's Ryan Mitchell. I'm meeting Emma for coffee this morning." I just wanted to say that out loud to someone who would understand what it means. He put on clothes, not the CEO clothes, not the investor dinner clothes. Jeans he'd had for 4 years, a dark Henley. a jacket that his mother had bought him 2 Christmases ago because she said it made him look like a person rather than a business card. He looked in the mirror for a moment. The man looking back was not the man who had sat at Bellini's with smiles on his face and divorce papers in his breast pocket. He was older in the eyes, not in a defeated way, in the way that people get older when they've paid the price of something real. He drove himself, parked 2 blocks away, which gave him 2 blocks to walk and 2 blocks to settle. The coffee shop on Armitage was a neighborhood place, not the kind of curated, Instagram-optimized space that Bradford Chase's social circle frequented, but a real place with regulars and a counter that had been there for 20 years, and the particular smell of a room that has served a community long enough to have earned its own atmosphere. He arrived at 8:52, 8 minutes early. He chose a table near the window, not the back corner. He ordered a coffee and held it with both hands and waited. He did not check his phone. He did not rehearse. He had promised himself he would not rehearse, because rehearsal was preparation for performance, and what he owed Emma Parker was not performance. She walked in at 9:01. She was in a camel-colored coat over dark jeans, her hair down, and she was carrying a worn leather bag that Ryan recognized she'd had it for years. Bought at a market in Andersonville their second year together. He had teased her about it once, too casual, he'd said. She'd kept using it anyway, which told him something he had not been paying enough attention to learn. She saw him walk to the table, sat down across from him, and for a moment they looked at each other in the way people look at each other when they have been many things together and are not sure what they are now. "You're early," she said. 8 minutes, he said. "You used to be late for everything. I'm practicing being in the actual moment instead of the next one." Something shifted in her eyes, not quite a smile. "But how's that going?" "Badly some days," he said honestly. "Better lately." The server came and Emma ordered tea, the same kind she always ordered, a detail that Ryan noted with something that wasn't quite pain but lived in the same neighborhood. When the server left, Emma folded her hands on the table and looked at him. "I almost didn't come," she held her gaze. "What changed your mind?" She thought for a moment. "Marcus told me something. At the gala. He said you had a chance to come and you didn't, because you said it wasn't your place." She paused. "The Ryan I married would have shown up, to manage the situation. To be seen." She studied him. "The fact that you didn't told me more than a phone call would have." "He wasn't supposed to tell you that either," Ryan said. "Marcus tells people things he thinks they need to know," Emma said. "It's one of his better qualities." Ryan almost smiled. "It is." The tea arrived. Emma wrapped her hands around the mug. The coffee shop moved around them, a couple at the counter. 2 women with laptops near the back, the sound of the cities muffled outside, and Ryan and Emma sat censored it, occupying the particular stillness of 2 people who have a great deal to say and are not yet sure how to say it. "I want to ask you something," Ryan said, "and I want you to know before I ask it that your answer doesn't change anything I'm doing. It's not a negotiation, it's just something I need to ask." Emma nodded. "Did you ever—" He stopped, started again. "In the years when you were protecting the company, when you were quietly making sure the ground held, were you angry? Did you resent it?" Emma looked at her tea for a moment, then looked at him. "No," she said, "not then. At the time it felt like love. The most concrete expression of it I knew how to make." She paused. "I was a person who had grown up with resources. I knew what they could do. And I watched someone I loved building something real, something that mattered, and the resources were there, and the need was there, and the decision felt obvious." She paused again. "The anger came later, not about the money. About the other thing, the way I looked at you," he said. "The way you stopped looking," she said. "There's a difference. You didn't look at me with hatred, you looked at me with dismissal. Like I had been assessed and the assessment was final and there was nothing left to see." Her voice was steady. "Not angry now, just factual in the way that settled grief is factual. That is a very particular kind of invisibility, and it is very hard to live inside." "I know," he said. "I didn't know then, I know now." "What changed?" she asked. Not rhetorically, genuinely. He thought about how to answer. "Losing you made me look at what I had built the story of myself on," he said. "And most of it was a structure with a false foundation. I had convinced myself that success was self-generated, that I was the sole author of my own life. And when your family trust started withdrawing and this business started showing the places where it had been held up, I had to look at all of it. The whole picture." He paused. "Including what I had done to the person who built the scaffold." Emma looked at him for a long time. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "The trust withdrawing was not a decision I made. My father made certain inquiries after the divorce became public and made his own assessment of the situation. I did not ask him to withdraw. I also did not ask him to continue." She paused. "That was his decision. She stopped. My father is protective in ways that express themselves financially. It's the family language. Ryan stared at her. You didn't pull the trust. No, she said. The word landed and rearranged several things in Ryan's mind simultaneously. He had spent 5 months operating with a specific understanding of the sequence of events, Emma walking out, Emma's family withdrawing support, the connection between those two things implying a decision, a choice in action. He had never blamed her for it. It had seemed, if anything, reasonable, but he had assumed it was intentional. I didn't know that, he said. I know you didn't, she said. I found out Marcus had told you about the trust situation. I didn't correct the assumption because honestly I was watching to see what you would do with it. Whether you would come to me angry, whether you would make it about the business. She held his gaze. You didn't. You came to me about the marriage, about what you did to me as a person. She paused. That mattered. Ryan sat with that. With the understanding that he had been, without knowing it, passing a test he didn't know he was taking, and that the test was fair. Your father, he said carefully. Does he know about any of this, the conversation we've been having? He knows I had coffee with you today, Emma said. He has opinions, I imagine he does, unfavorable ones, she said, and there was a dryness in her voice. The closest thing to humor that had appeared in the conversation, and Ryan felt the room expand slightly. Should I be concerned, he said. About my father? She looked at him steadily. He is a man who expresses love through control and calls it protection. He is also the reason I spent 3 years in a professional world I eventually had to leave in order to breathe. She paused as, I love him and I handle him. You don't need to worry about George Parker. Okay, Ryan said. You should probably know, Emma continued, that my mother likes you. She always liked you. She told me, when I told her about the divorce, that she thought you were a good man who had lost himself temporarily. She paused. Those were her exact words. Temporarily, Ryan looked at his coffee. Your mother is more generous than I deserve. She is a very generous woman, Emma agreed. Also very good at reading people. She's rarely wrong. The weight of what her mother had said, a good man who had lost himself, temporarily settled into Ryan's chest alongside everything else he was carrying. He had not thought of it that way. He had thought of it as, I became someone I am not proud of, but temporarily implied a before and an after. Implied that the man who drank bourbon with Bradford Chase and pushed divorce papers across white tablecloths was not the final version. Was not the true version. He wanted desperately to believe that. He was also aware that wanting to believe something and earning the right to believe it were two different things. Emma, he said, I have to ask you something directly. And I need you to know that whatever the answer is, I will respect it completely. I will not argue. I will not try to change your mind. I will just hear it. She met his eyes. Ask, he steadied himself. Is there any version of a path forward? I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm not asking you to commit to anything. I'm asking whether the door is open, even a crack. Because if it isn't, I need to know that honestly. Not because I'll stop doing the work is mine either way, but because I want to be honest with you about what I'm hoping for, and I want to give you the full information so your answer is real. Emma was quiet for what felt like a very long time. She looked at her hands, at the mug, at the table between them, and then she looked at him. I have thought about this, she said carefully, every day since the bench in Lincoln Park. I have thought about it the way you think about something that has no easy answer from every angle. In every light, she paused. The woman I was when I married you would have said yes immediately, because she was still in the habit of saying yes to things that scared her when they came from you. She paused again. The woman I am now says maybe, and I need you to understand that maybe, from where I'm standing, is enormous. It is not a small word. It is the largest concession I know how to make right now. Ryan felt the maybe land in his chest like a hand on a door that had been sealed. I'll take it, he said quietly. It comes with conditions, she said. Tell me, slow, she said. Whatever this is, it moves at my pace. Not the Ryan Mitchell pace, not the close the deal pace. My pace, understood and honest, she said completely. If something feels wrong, I say it and you hear it without getting defensive. If something isn't working, we say it and figure it out together instead of one of us going quiet. She looked directly at him. I went quiet for 11 years. I am done going quiet. I need you to not go quiet, he said. I need you to be loud, actually. I need you to tell me when I'm slipping back into old patterns. I won't always like hearing it, but I will always want to know. She held his gaze. Something in her expression shifted not all the way to warmth, but unmistakably in that direction. The movement of a face that has been held in careful control and has chosen, consciously, to let something through. One more thing, she said. Anything. The man who sat in that restaurant and pushed those papers across the table like I was a problem he was solving. She stopped, steadied. I need to know that man is not coming back. Not the success. I don't care about the success, the arrogance. The way he looked at people and decided their value. That man, she looked at him. Is he gone? Ryan thought about the legal pad. The cold coffee mornings. Dr. Owens asks, what does the better version of you do on a Tuesday? Sasha saying, you're actually in the room now. His mother's hand over his at the kitchen table. Derek's voice on the phone for an hour and 40 minutes, talking about his nephew's soccer season. He's not gone, Ryan said. I won't lie to you and say he's gone. He surfaces. I see him in moments when I'm under pressure, when my ego gets ahead of my character. But I catch him faster now. And every time I catch him, I push back. He paused. I can't promise you perfect. I can promise you honest, and I can promise you that I will keep doing the work every day, even when it's hard and unglamorous and there's nobody watching. Emma looked at him for a long moment, and then she said something he had not expected. I know, she said. I've been watching. He stared at her. What do you mean? She wrapped both hands around her mug. The Sasha you mentioned, the engineer. Her older sister is on the Whitmore Foundation board. She mentioned a conversation she'd heard about you and her sister at a late-night work session. She said Sasha came home that night and told her that her CEO had apologized for not being present and then spent 3 hours actually listening. Emma paused. The client you had in Lincoln Park, the one who said you were the most honest CEO he'd talked to in 10 years. He is a friend of my mother's, she called me. She paused again. Marcus has been talking to me since January, Ryan. Not behind your back, with your interests at heart. Telling me what he was seeing. Because Marcus Webb has known for 2 years that what you were doing to me was wrong, and he has been waiting patiently for you to figure it out. Ryan absorbed this. The architecture of it. The way the people around him had been paying attention in ways he hadn't known. The way Emma had been receiving information and sitting with it, and evaluating it not on the basis of what he said, but on the basis of what the people who watched him on ordinary Tuesdays reported. She had not taken his word for it. She had waited for the evidence. The real evidence. The kind that doesn't lie because it happens when no one you're trying to impress is looking. You've been building a case, he said. I've been protecting myself, she said. There's a difference. She looked at him steadily. I could not afford to believe in someone who hadn't actually changed. I did that once. I spent a decade doing that, she paused. I needed the evidence from people who had nothing to gain from giving it to me. And the evidence was good, Ryan. That's why I'm here. Something cracked open in Ryan Mitchell's chest. Not painfully, the way a window opens in a room that has been closed too long, sudden, necessary, and accompanied by the shock of real air. His eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. This was one of the things he had learned, that hiding it was a form of the same armor that had cost him everything. And he was done with armor. Thank you, he said, for paying attention. For not just taking my word for it. For doing this carefully. He stopped. Collected himself. I didn't deserve that kind of care. But I am grateful for it. Emma looked at him. And for the first time since the bench in Lincoln Park, since the coffee shop encounter in February, since the phone call on Saturday night, for the first since Bellini's Evanna Parker let something warm cross her face. Not the full warmth, not the old warmth, the easy warmth of 11 years ago in that coffee shop in Wicker Park. Something newer. Something that had been earned at greater cost and therefore held differently. Don't thank me yet, she said. We haven't done anything yet, I know, he said. But I'm grateful anyway. They sat for a while longer. Ordered second drinks, coffee for him, more tea for her. Talked about real things. Her work at the Whitmore Foundation, which she described with the kind of energy that belongs to people who have found work that matches their actual capacity. He told her about Sasha's roadmap, about the product line that was developing in ways that felt genuinely exciting for the first time in years. They talked about Carol Mitchell's visit. Emma laughed when Ryan described his mother rearranging his refrigerator. She did that to ours too, Emma said, every time she visited. I forgot about that, Ryan said. She put everything by category. She was very firm about it. She alphabetized the condiments one time. Emma laughed. A real laugh, unguarded, surprised out of her, and Ryan felt it move through him like a frequency he had forgotten existed. Like the sound of something restored. They left the coffee shop at 11:15. Stood on the sidewalk in April air, which in Chicago still carries winter in its back pocket and surprises you with it, and looked at each other. Saturday was good, Emma said. Yeah, he said, it was. Next Saturday I'm at a site visit upstate. But the Saturday after there's a community art show at the foundation. If you wanted to come, she paused, not as anything. Just as someone who is part of the world again. I'd like that, he said. She nodded, started to turn, then stopped. Ryan. She turned back to look at him. The thing you said to me at the bench, that you saw the keynote and realized you'd never given me the space to be myself." She paused. "I want you to know that I'm not going to shrink back down to fit something comfortable. Not for you, not for anyone. The person you would be building with if we build anything is this person. The full size of her. She's the only one I want to build with," Ryan said. "She always was, I just wasn't smart enough to know it." Emma held his gaze for one more moment, and then she smiled fully. For the first time, the real Emma Parker's smile that he had fallen in love with at a coffee shop counter 12 years ago, and had spent the last several years burying under the weight of his own worst instincts. She walked away down Armitage Avenue in her camel coat with her worn leather bag, and this time Ryan watched her go without dread, without the vertigo of loss, with something that had no word exactly but lived in the space between hope and certainty, too grounded to be wishful, too new to be assured. He stood on that sidewalk for a moment. Let the April cold do what it wanted. Let the city move around him in its relentless, indifferent, beautiful way. Then he called Marcus. She said maybe, Ryan said when Marcus answered. A pause. And then Marcus Webb, who was not a demonstrative man, said thank God. Ryan laughed, actually laughed the way Emma used to laugh, surprised out of him by something real. "You've been running point on this for months." "Somebody had to," Marcus said. "You were busy falling apart correctly, which is important work, but it's not a team sport. I was handling logistics. Did Emma know you were talking to me?" "She knew I cared about both of you and that I was not going to choose sides. She respected that." A pause. "She's a remarkable woman." "Ryan, I know," Ryan said. "I know that better than I've ever known anything." He drove home with the windows down despite the cold. He called his mother from the car. Carol picked up on the first ring. "Well," she said, no preamble, straight to it. Classic Carol Mitchell. She said maybe, Ryan said. His mother made a sound he had not heard from her in years. "Relief, pure, unperformed, maternal relief. That's enough," she said. "That is more than enough to work with." "I know, Ryan." His mother's voice shifted, became the voice she used when she was about to say something she meant in the largest possible sense. "You remember what I told you? The real work, not the business kind, I remember." "You're doing it every day," he said. "Every Tuesday." A pause. Then Carol said, "Your father would be proud of you, not for the company. For this," another pause, "I'm proud of you." For this, Ryan pressed his hand against the wheel and held on. 3 weeks later, he went to the community art show at the Whitmore Foundation. He went as a person, not as anything else. He stood in a room full of art made by people from the neighborhoods Emma's foundation served, and he looked at the work slowly, without trying to assess its market value or network implications or anything else his old self would have calculated. He looked at it the way Emma had always looked at things, with full attention, without agenda. Emma found him in front of a large painting, a community mural reproduced on canvas, chaotic and colorful and full of the kind of human density that expensive apartments tried to design out of neighborhoods. She stood beside him. They looked at the painting together. "What do you see?" she asked. He thought about it. Really thought. "People taking up space," he said. Without apologizing for it, she looked at the painting. Then at him. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's exactly it." They stood side by side in front of that painting for a long time. Not holding hands, not making promises, just standing in the same space, in the same direction, looking at the same thing and seeing it the same way for the first time. It was not a grand moment. It was not the kind of moment that gets described in toasts or written about in anniversary cards. It was just two people in a room full of art on an ordinary Saturday afternoon in Chicago, standing close enough to feel the warmth of each other's presence, both of them finally looking at what was actually there. Months later, when people asked Ryan Mitchell what changed him, and people asked, because the change was visible in ways that professional circles notice and discuss, he never gave the business answer. He never talked about the institutional restructuring, or the capital adjustments, or the product improvements that had returned Mitchell Technologies to solid ground. He said, "I lost someone who had always seen me clearly. And I had to become someone worth being seen." And the people who heard him say it could tell, without knowing the full story, that he meant it in the way that people mean things when the meaning cost them something real. Emma Parker became Emma Parker Whitfield again, not because she needed the name, but because the name was hers and she had stopped hiding the parts of herself that other people might find complicated or imposing. She led the Whitmore Foundation into its most significant period of growth. She spoke at conferences and sat on boards and used the resources and connections she had spent a decade downplaying, openly and without apology, in service of work that mattered. She and Ryan moved slowly. They moved at her pace, as agreed. Coffee on Saturdays, dinner eventually. Arguments, real ones, where Emma said difficult things and Ryan heard them and did not retreat into performance or defense. where Ryan said difficult things and Emma received them without going quiet. It was not perfect. It was not the effortless warmth of Wicker Park 12 years ago. It was something harder than that and more durable. Something built by two people who knew exactly what it had cost to get to the room they were standing in and were unwilling to waste it. Carol Mitchell, upon hearing that things were progressing, said simply, "Don't rush it, don't slow it down, let it be what it is, it was what it was." And what it was imperfect, earned, honestly reckoned with turned out to be exactly enough. Ryan Mitchell had walked out of a restaurant on the 42nd floor of a Chicago tower, believing he had freed himself from the one person who had ever truly known him. He had celebrated. He had ordered wine he didn't drink and told himself he was finally winning. What he had actually done was begin the longest and most important journey of his life, not from Chicago to success, but from the man he had performed being to the man he had always, underneath all the armor and ambition and fear, actually been. The woman he thought he had outgrown was the woman who knew him before the money and stayed through the worst of it, and walked away when she had to in order to find herself, and waited not for him but for the evidence that he was worth waiting for. And he was, not because he built a company, not because the numbers recovered, not because he gave a better account of himself in a coffee shop than he had given in a restaurant 5 months before. Because on ordinary Tuesdays when nobody was watching and there was nothing to perform and no story to maintain, Ryan Mitchell showed up as himself fully imperfectly, honestly, and kept choosing to be better than the man who had once slid papers across a table and laughed. That man had believed he was the most important person in the story. He had been wrong. The most important person in the story was the woman who had always known his worth, even when he had forgotten her own, and she had waited, not out of weakness, but out of the kind of love that is strong enough to walk away and wise enough to know when to turn back around.